as I said before, that sometimes in life, you can go home, been away from home for a number of years, and sometimes people just thrive on confusion.
Yeah.
I think it was Mary J. Blige when she said, she just couldn't keep a good man. I just can't do it. And they asked me, why can't you do it? Because all of my life growing up, everybody was always upset. You know, coming out, shut that door. Now, what you think you ain't, boy? You know air conditioning. You shut the door. Or you come downstairs and say, good morning. What's so good about it? Or every Friday night there's a fight. If mama ain't attacking daddy, daddy attacking mama. Everybody got a little buzz going.
Come on, Doc.
And so when you see situations like that, what Mary J was saying is that when a good man, when she met a good man, and he was nice and quiet, and he brought her roses and flowers, and said, what are you trying to do? No, she wasn't used to that.
Right.
She thought there was a game going on here.
Right.
And she's trying to figure out what the game is. Well, what in the heck are you trying to do? Don't acting all quiet and acting all nice. That was offensive to her. Because she was accustomed to growing up in a family where people fussed and they fought all the time, and that was the normal for her. And when a good man came along, she would push them away from her because there was something that they wanted from her that she could not give them. And the only thing they wanted from her was love. But love for her was not the kind of love, agape love, or the kind of real love, because she had never experienced it in her life. And that has been the greatest threat to her happiness, is trying to understand how to love someone in a way that is not always about being beat up or being cussed at or going out and getting high, any of those kinds of things. And so when you are raised in a family, that was 17 in my family, 15 of them lived beyond a year old and to be adults. But there was always upsets going on. If my brothers wasn't fussing, they were fighting. And if they weren't fighting, then they were going down and saying terrible things to other people and things like that. And after a while, I had to say to myself, I don't think that's the life that I want for me.
Right.
I just don't think I want that. And so when I went to visit them, and when they moved out of North Carolina to New York, and they were sitting on the stoop, smoking whatever the drug of the day was, they were snorting coke and smoking marijuana and doing whatever else, and drinking, whatever their drink of the day was. And I said, well, as a high school student, I said, well, I don't think I want that. Oh, come on, go ahead. What's wrong with you? Well, you think you better than everybody else. You have to fight that. If you're going to keep your mind, not their mind, if you want to keep your mind, then you have to be a good custodian of what you do and what you say and where you go and how you speak about other people. Otherwise, you get drawn back into that thing that's no good for you, and you wind up going through life just hopping along, just barely making it, and we complaining about everybody in the world. If white people would do this, then I would be so good. There's some white people ain't gonna never love you. I don't care what you do for them. They're never gonna love you. And guess what? Some black people ain't gonna love you either. I don't care what you do for them. But it's easier for us to go through life blaming other people. It's easier for us to go ahead and put a label on everything. Now, I do believe that Black Lives Matter, and we should march every time a white cop shoots a black man and kills him. But I also believe that every time we kill another black man, we ought to march for that too.
All right. Come on now.
But nobody marches for things that we do to each other.
You know I know that.
I know you do. And you've been doing it. But across the country, when do we see all our African American stars and football players and basketball players, you know, they wind up on the south side of Chicago, or they're out here in Broad Park, or they're walking down here and say, we can no longer allow this kind of thing to go on in our community. We can't allow drugs to take over our community.
Amen.
And then that's true. And if the police cannot protect us from ourselves.
Amen.
Jesus.
They can't do it. But you can. What I have found in my lifetime, that the person who has the greatest influence over thugs are grandmas. I don't care. Big Bobby can walk around with 245s in the back of his pocket. And if grandma comes out there and says, boy, what are you doing? And she walk up to him, slap him upside the head. Get out of here. What are you doing to these people? And Big Bobby now becomes Little Bobby. Grandma. But if it was anybody else, he ready to cut your throat, blow your brains out. So why don't we empower these grandmas? Put them out there. Give them some support. They know Little Bobby. They raised Little Bobby.
Yes.
Wow.
And he's going around terrorizing the whole community. You get grandma in the car down there and they're taking out to the corner where he's the king of this corner. But when grandma get out of the car, she's the king of the corner.
Get that switch out the tree.
Come on, now.
Pull that switch.
But we don't support grandmas in that way anymore, you know. Let me wind up here.
You and I, Doc.
Let me wind up here. I don't care what is going on in your life. I don't care what your life has been prior to today. But what I can do is guarantee you that if you would keep your mind, if I came back here 24 months later and looked at you, most of all of your debts would be paid off. You would have started in the direction to actually doing what you want to do with your life. You would change the trajectory of where your children are. And when you have children, you have to run for your life. When I moved to Suffolk, the best house I wanted to buy was in downtown Suffolk on West Washington Street. On East Washington Street, most of the minority people live. West Washington Street, they had a lot of older, really nice houses because they wanted to move away from black people. And so they were moving out into the suburbs. And so when I moved here some 30 years ago, there was this nice house down on Washington Street. And it was 3 stories, and it had a dumbwaiter in it where you could, you know, cook in the kitchen, and you could go open that little slot, and then you could send food up to the 2nd floor, to the 3rd floor. And I said to myself, my ancestors were slaves. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do what they used to do. Well, I'm gonna enjoy this now. My parents used to put food in that dumbwaiter and send it up to the 2nd, 3rd floor white people. But now I can buy this same house and enjoy the good things of life. And I said to my wife, we're gonna buy this house. And then I said, but before we do that, I was living in North Carolina at the time. I said, let me go up on Friday night and on Saturday night. And that's what I did. And man, people were terrorizing the neighborhood just 1 block over. Almost every weekend, somebody got shot or cut. And so, as a parent, my job was to take my children and run for my life. So I moved to the northern part of Suffolk, where it was good to raise children. I didn't have to be afraid of whether they went out into the yard and they got shot out in the yard. I could leave and go out of town and leave the oldest one in charge and knew that they had enough things to do, an acre backyard and doing all this, and they could play outside, play video games, invite friends over. I mean, so the point is that when you have children, you have to do what is best for raising them.
Come on, Doc. Come on now.
I don't care. Someone told me I stay in this house because my grandmama owned this. I don't care who owned it. If it's not good for my children, then I am going to run for my life because I want to raise them in a way that they can get up and they can have respect for themselves, respect for other people, and be able to live a good and prosperous life.
That's it.
So wherever you are, if it's not good for your children, run for your life. The same people that we do houses for. This old lady told me, she said when she moved in, she says, I used to stay sick all the time. But after, this is the one we built in Eden about 4 or 5 years ago. She said, but after I moved into this apartment complex, she said, I got well. I said, you know what my doctor said? It was just having steady heat. It was simple as having steady heat. There was no air coming in the house. There were no weak periods of time where she went without oil. And so her respiratory problems and all of her bones that were aching 24/7, she felt like a new woman.
Yeah.
Because she ran for her life. She lived in a house that her mother used to live in. Then she lived in, and now she was an old woman.
Wow.
But she stayed there because that's where my mother lived. I don't care who lived there. When you have children and a family to deal with, run for your life. And the last thing that I want to say about this is, in keeping your mind.
Talking about.
In keeping your mind. Why is it that men and women can't get on the same page? His mind is somewhere. Your mind is somewhere else. And the only thing that you have in common is the children that you brought in the world. Everything else, it's me and you, baby. You over here, I'm over there. So many married families are just business partners. They live in the same house. And they have the same address. The mama teaches the children one thing. And the daddy teaches the children something else. And they're polar opposite to each other. A woman says to a man, I don't have to listen to you. You ain't my daddy. And then a man says to a woman, you can talk all you want to, I'll never listen.
Wow.
I got a book that's coming out in January, and I tell the story about me. It's about couples. It was about couples. The book is not about couples, but this particular paragraph was, and it was talking about, I was at the barber shop down here in Churchland, and the barber was talking about his wife wanted to go to a chick flick, and I forget what the movie was, and he didn't want to go. And so he says, well, the only reason I'll go is, you know, she wants to go, but I'll just stay out in the area, eat popcorn or whatever. I don't want to go. And then he says, you know, she always telling me these things about this, that, what she likes. And then he said, but I don't ever listen. And he was proud that I don't ever listen. And then he said, and when she was talking to him about the movie, and he's told her he didn't want to go, and she says, oh, I don't care. You can do what you want to. And he said, and I was glad. So he didn't see any conflict in that at all. Because he was doing what he wanted to do. And all she was saying to him is that, I would love it if you would go with me to do something that I like to do. Mm-hmm. That's all she was saying. Mm-hmm. And he was just, you know why we do it? Because you have an unkept mind. Once you get married, the Lord said you're no more twain. You're no more one. No more twain, but you're one. But then we get into this whole thing about who's the man and who's the woman. I love cooking. And I like to do it for the family, not only my wife, but also to my children when they come. I spend a day or two cooking for Thanksgiving. I love it. But then on Friday morning, when the trash man comes and I asked my wife, I said, well, I went out to take out the trash. She said, well, I took it to the street. Because she didn't see that as a male's job or a female's job. It's called working together.
Exactly. That's what it's called.
It's called that if I go in the kitchen and I cook up some really nice food and that kind of thing, and she'll come right in the kitchen and start washing the dishes.
Amen. All right. Amen.
That's what it takes.
But then when she sit down to eat, she'll say, this is really good. Because I cooked it with love. So what is it about us as people that there's this competition between men and women going around and saying such stupid stuff, and I don't need a man. That's because we never had a real one.
Right about it.
Man, I don't need no woman. What I'm saying to you is, I want to use women, but I don't need them in my heart, in my mind.
Look out.
So if we don't get that part of our lives together, then how can you keep your mind? And by keeping it, we mean stay on Jesus. He said, but this cause shall a man leave his mother and his father and do what? Cleave to his wife.
That's right.
Become one.
That's right.
That's right.
That's it.
But we have been raised by folks, and I tell people all the time, some of the best things you can do when you get married is forget everything that your mother and father told you about marriage.
All right. All right.
All right.
Say it again.
Forget everything.
I have two nephews who just got married, and I performed the wedding ceremony for one of them. And that's what I told them in doing the ceremony. You forget about what people say roles are. Sit down and you and your wife and you all talk together and what works for you. I mean, your mama might see you carrying out the trash. If I never took out the trash for no man. You let him take out the trash. But the question is, do you love each other and does what you're doing work for you? Amen. Somebody tell a man, well, if you're working all day, I'll never give my money to a woman. But if she can pay the bills and she know how to manage the money, just because you have nothing but breath and britches, you want to say, I'm not going to give my money to no woman?
Come on now.
What works for you is what's important. And keeping your mind stayed on Jesus the Christ. Trust ye in the Lord forever. If you trust the Lord forever, then there's nothing that you cannot do. I had more missing meals as a child. My parents could only afford what they call a $5 box. On Saturday, they go down to the store and they go in with $5. Then the grocery guy, he would put into that box beef bones, the ends of bologna when you couldn't cut a large slice off it anymore, 4 or 5 dented cans that were dented and they could not sell them, some lard. And we had to make do with that. And we had to make do with whatever we could get. And then if it was in the ice box at that point in time, and if we ran out of ice, sometimes your food would almost get rancid before you could put more ice into the freezer. And we had to try to figure out how to salvage that food, even though it was almost bad. You know, one day I sat down and I said, this is not the life that I want for me. And what I have to do now is to stay focused and try to figure out how I can elevate myself to the point where I care enough about me,
Yeah.
that I'm willing to try to keep me safe and try to keep me going. And so I went into the military when I got up to be older. The first thing I did was I signed an allotment, send money back home to my mom.
Amen.
A few dollars,
That's what I did.
but a few steady dollars a month coming in and she could do with what she wanted to do. And so it doesn't matter where you were born, what order you were born, who your daddy was, who your mama was. If you could keep that mind and respect that mind and learn the tricks that you play on yourself and know the lies that you have and keep that limbic brain from overruling your neocortical brain, teach you how to make good decisions in your life, then you can do anything that you want with your life. Anything. I slept on the back of a pickup truck when I was in law school. It was 110, 15 degrees in the shade in that camper. I stayed out of it most of the time and stayed in the school or in the library or wherever I could go, in the dormitory, sitting there watching TV with the guys who lived there, or whatever the situation was. But all I knew was that out of 105 people who went to that law school, I said only one graduated. That's going to be me. 3 years later, 45 people graduated, and I'm one of those 45. So it doesn't matter that you didn't go to Yale or go to Harvard or whatever. It's just stay focused on what you want to do. Understanding that prayer can change things, can change your life. And it doesn't matter if you're 50 years old today, you can still be blessed. It doesn't matter what your age is or what other people say about you. You can choose to keep your mind. Thou will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. He says, if you keep your mind stayed on me, I will keep you in perfect peace. And you are perfect, right where you sit today.